Hi, everyone. Since it's so important to have land for urban agriculture, you can't really have an urban farm without it. I just wanted to give you a short presentation on what some of the most common ways are to get land for an urban farm. I kind of divided into 5 categories, and we're going to talk just briefly about each one. So, first is using your own land. Could be a backyard, a front yard, even a driveway, a side yard. Your own land is absolutely the easiest way to get started because you have control over your own land if you own it. For the most part, there's some limits to that. Like if you're in an HOA, they have something to say about that. But if you are a landowner, if you're lucky enough to be a landowner, this is the easiest place to get started. If you are a renter, you could explore it with your landlord. Just make sure that the parameters are clear, that you have a clear understanding and agreement, preferably in writing, with your landlord. Here's an example of an urban farmer. His name is Rishi Kumar. He's not in the picture, obviously, but Rishi's the farmer at Sarvodaya in Pomona, California. And he was looking for a site for an urban farm, and he found this neighborhood in Pomona that has these huge oversized lots. He was able to put together a down payment and purchase this property that has a really large backyard, and he had another place to live, so he's renting out the house that's on the property, and the rental of the home pretty much covers the mortgage. So that means his cost for land is minimal, and he's more paying for the water of that land. And, you know, it really depends on whether you have the opportunity and the assets and the, the means to buy land. But if you can, that is a great way to get started. If you don't have your own land, you might have a family member or a friend or a neighbor who will let you grow on their property. We're going to look at an example of a farm, a system of farms in Florida. I believe it's in Tampa or Orlando, where it's a network of backyard urban farms with farmers on bikes. And so the people who allow their backyards to be used for that get some produce in exchange. We're going to be talking in another presentation about this farmer. Her name is Kim, and she's the owner of Bell Urban Farm in Conway, Arkansas. And her mother-in-law had purchased a lot that had a home on it and had some space around it for farming. And they've allowed Kim and her husband to rent it for a minimal price to have a farm. And then there's finding and leasing a vacant lot in your neighborhood. A lot of urban farms start this way, like this one. This is Emerald Community Farm in Philadelphia. A lady named Elisa started this farm, and she was able to buy this Philadelphia row house, a decade or so ago when it was very, very affordable. And she had 2 vacant lots right next to her where they were filled with trash. There was an old abandoned van, and she was able to work with her local land trust and with the city to get permission to grow on those lots. And ultimately, she was able to acquire them, to purchase them for this group. So it's really important to find the landowner when you identify a vacant lot. Sometimes that's a little challenging. Sometimes cities or land trusts can help you with that, talking to the landowner, finding them in the first place, and then negotiating a free or low cost lease with them. So a few examples of sites that have been created from vacant lots are the High Point Juneau Garden and Urban Farm in Seattle. This was a vacant lot, or several, next to a public housing project. The city of Seattle helped to get that started through their P-Patch program. Here we have Chris Gooden and Dominique Villanueva. They're the proprietors of Fountain Heights Farm in Birmingham, Alabama. They first started farming just in their yard, but they had 3 vacant lots next door one of which a house had burned down on like several years before, and it was just a community eyesore. They were able to work with the city and find the owner of one of the lots to start their farm. And they're currently looking at expanding because there's quite a bit of vacant land in this neighborhood. And then there's Greenleaf Farm in Memphis, Tennessee, where a church partnered with a nonprofit called Knowledge Quest, and they were able to cobble together 30 vacant lots to create this wonderful nonprofit farm that helps to feed food insecure communities in Memphis. Another strategy is to team up with an organization that already has land. Churches have tons of land, sometimes food banks, museums, schools, universities, lots of nonprofit organizations. These institutions already have land. Why not partner up with them and help them use it on behalf of the community? A few examples here are St. Joseph Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is a facility that's used to be an old Catholic orphanage, and then it became a retreat center. It has so many different purposes over the years. And so this nonprofit organization partnered with the church and with this facility to create a large urban farm to make use of land that was otherwise just sitting there. Then we have Alpha Omega Veteran Services in Memphis, Tennessee. This is an amazing urban farm. It's on a site that's owned by the federal government. It used to be Army quarters back in, I think, World War I and World War II. Officers were housed here, and now it's housing for disabled veterans. And there's all this land just sitting there around the housing, and now it's been repurposed into an urban farm where food is distributed to the veterans in the community and also sold in the community. And here's a Afrocentric teaching museum in Atlanta, Georgia, where they've partnered with a nonprofit called Gangstas to Growers, and they allow the kids who are in this program to have an urban farm here on this property, and they showcase the produce in their museum. And the last one I think that's really important to consider is that in urban areas, there are many types of abandoned and underutilized land. There's land under utility lines. There's floodplains where it's not allowable to develop. There's old military bases that have been decommissioned and are just sitting there. Rooftops, Army Corps of Engineers land. There's portions of public parks and city facilities that are just sitting. So there's lots of land that is being wasted. So if you can find some of this land, then you may be able to figure out a way to use it by working with whoever the owners are. This example is a farmer in Richmond, California, which is in the Bay Area. It's sort of an old industrial town, and there were these old commercial greenhouses on the outskirts of the city that used to be for commercial flower farming, which largely moved offshore in the 1970s. So this farmer, Pilar, was able to lease these greenhouses and the land around them for a really, really good rate. And a few other examples of repurposing underutilized land. This is the Carbon Farm in Atlanta, Georgia, and you can see here that it's under utility right-of-way lines. Here we have Eat South in Montgomery, Alabama. This is an old railroad switching yard that just sat vacant for 50 years or so until the city of Montgomery partnered up with a nonprofit group to start this urban farm. It all has to be done in containers because of toxicity in the soil, arsenic and other things in the soil. But it's a wonderful teaching farm where a lot of food is sold and distributed as well. And here's a cool example in Seattle, Rainier Beach Urban Farm and Wetland. It's an area that's prone to flooding. It cannot be developed. And so in the wettest area of it, they do, they just protect the environment there. They have habitat for wildlife. And then in the drier portion of it, they have a nice meeting facility and they have urban farming. So 3 great examples, and there's many, many others around the country. A few things to consider. once you are trying to find land, really look into your city, whether they have a land bank or an adopt a lot program that you can tap into. Does your community, your city, your region have a land trust that you can work with? Because land trusts are nonprofit organizations that exist to help groups purchase property that's often used for things like parks or could be an urban farm. And what are your personal connections? Are you a member of a church that might have some land? Do you know your city council person, or could you get to know them? What affiliations do you have or do you have within your network? Because oftentimes this is the way that you end up connecting with land. You know somebody who has some influence and you're able to work with them to find a piece of property and turn it into a farm. Then just a few more things to consider. Once you have a site in mind, you really want to take a look at what your city allows, because cities have different zones. Residential zones of cities allow certain things that, where certain things aren't allowable, like your city may not want pot-bellied pigs, or this is some other type of small pig, heritage breed pig. But cities often don't want those in residential areas. It might have where you might have to have agricultural zoning. So anyway, you want to see what's allowed in your part of the city, because the city does control things like what animals you can keep and how many, bees as well. What kind of rules govern home-based businesses in your cities? What kind of rules govern structures? Like if you want to build a greenhouse, the city's probably going to have something to say about what specifications it needs to have, what kind of permitting you're going to need. And on-site sales, for example, some municipalities allow people to have a little front yard farm stand and others do not. And these kind of rules can be a little hard to find out about. Your city planning department is always a good place to start. And I think that's all I wanted to share about this. Your readings will also give you more insight into how to acquire land. There's so many different ways to do it. These are just a few helpful examples, and you'll be finding more.